Hey, my name is Jamel Jones, the lone wolf of real estate investing, and today we're breaking down the 3 best strategies for beginners, even if you're starting with zero money. We're going to cover wholesaling, aka contract assignments, lease options, that includes sandwich lease options and lease option assignments, and subject to. And each has its unique advantages when you're a lone wolf investor like I am. But before we dive into it, make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you hit that bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video, and make sure you share this video with whoever that you think may benefit from this content. So we're going to start with wholesaling. You probably have already heard this term before, maybe not. It's the most popular way to get started in real estate investing because it takes almost literally no money, but it does take a lot of time, right? So it's like a very high paying job. So in layman's terms, wholesaling is like playing real estate investor matchmaker. There's 3 parts. There's part A, which is the seller, part B, which is you, and part C, which is the buyer. So part B finds part A, that's you finding a seller who has a property that they're trying to sell. They either don't want to sell it on the market or they can't sell it on the market because they have liens or other things that need to be taken care of, or just a realtor doesn't want it because it needs a lot of work. They want to sell, they need to sell, but they can't. So we reach out to these people. We come to an agreement with them in terms of, I'm gonna give you an example immediately after this. We come to an agreement with them in terms of how much money they'll take cash for the deal. And that's the biggest part of this. This is cash. We can close it in as little as 7 days if you need to. All right. And so what we do is we get that agreement with them, an actual contract, and then B finds C. So now we find a buyer, a cash buyer, a investor who's looking for properties in that area to fix and flip. So what happens? You get the contract with A, you find C, and then you assign the contract that you have with A to C. So you got A, B, and C. You connect them and you drop out the middle and you put them 2 together. That's as simple as I can make it, guys. So here's an example. Let's say we have a property. We're going to use nice round numbers. Let's say we have a property worth $100,000. The property needs $20,000 in repairs. Remember that. You want to make $10,000 off of the deal. The investor wants to be all in at the most $70,000, including your assignment fee. So what we do is ARV minus 30%, 20 or 30%, depending on what area you're in. That's the investor's profit. That's the investor discount. That's what they're going to make once they fix the property up to sell it. So in this situation, we're going to say minus 30%. So now we're at $70,000. Okay, so now minus your $10,000, now we're at $60,000. Let's say the property needs $5,000 in work. Now we're at $55,000. And let's say that you need like 3 or 4,000 for just those oh shit situations. So now we're at $52,000. So $52,000 would be what we call your maximum allowable offer. So that's the most that you could offer where you can still make $10,000 off of that deal. Now, certain numbers in this situation can change. For example, your amount that you make, that can be altered. So I've done deals for as little as $500 because it didn't take any work and it was just signing a couple documents, quick 500. So the repair costs cannot change. Usually what the investors want to make, that 20 to 30%, that really won't change that much. Maybe a little bit of wiggle room depending on how hot the market is. For example, if the investor can get rid of that property quick, they may be willing to go down a little bit on how much profit that they make. And you'll learn all of these things once you have investors that you work with on a regular basis. But just to start off with, if you don't have any cash buyers on your database, on your list or anything like that, we want to assume that they want 20 to 30%. All right. So the maximum allowable offer is $52,000, but we're not going to start at $52,000 because that's the highest we can go. And we all know that people want to negotiate. So what I like to do is deduct about 15%. In this case, since I don't want to do that math, let's just say we're going to deduct that $12,000. So we're going to offer them $40,000. We're going to anchor them at $40,000. Now, typically these properties, especially with this example, is like it needs $5,000 in work, which is not a lot, but it's only $100,000 property. So start at 40. They're going to say no. Then, okay, how about 42? Now, keep this in mind. The lower you start and the increments that you go up, you're going to open up more room for you and the investor to make more money. So for example, if you get them at 40,000, if they say okay at 40,000, you either just added another $12,000 to your assignment fee, or another $12,000 profit for the investor, or a split. You take your assignment fee up to 16,000 and the other 6,000 goes to the investor. It is simple, but it's not easy. Like finding these sellers is the hardest part. Finding someone willing to sell at that price is the hardest part. And the reason why, it used to be easy 15 years ago, but the reason why is that there's so many wholesalers out here that don't know what they're doing and they're offering way too much for their property, which is making these sellers overvalue what they have. They mucking up the game. That's the best advice I can give you, is simple process, but it's not easy. All right, so now let's go into lease options. One of the bigger guys teaches it is ugly houses, pretty houses. Wholesaling is ugly houses, although you can get some good deals with the pretty house on a wholesale assignment also, but not typically, right? Lease options and subject twos both are the pretty house game. What's a lease option? There's two different types. There's a sandwich lease option and a lease option assignment, both of which you will find a seller who is selling their property that is livable. Someone can actually live in it. And what you're going to do is you're going to make them an offer. Obviously, you want to be as low as possible, but not as low as a wholesale deal, not as low as an assignment, not as low as a cash offer. And you're going to tell these people, I can get you close to, if not over sometimes, your asking price if you are willing to accept terms. What are terms? Terms are, I'm going to pay you over time, and then that agreement comes a little bit later when you guys decide on the exact terms. But up front, you want to know whether or not they are actually willing to accept terms or not. So a sandwich lease option, let's dive into that. We find a person who is selling a property that is worth $100,000 for $100,000. Okay. We'll go and we'll offer them like 90 and tell them that we'll make payments over time. There's a lot of other caveats that take place, whether or not they have a mortgage, whether or not they don't, and blah, 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 blah. But ultimately, we're going to try to get the best possible price. And we can't offer 90 if they don't have that amount of equity, right? Sometimes we can, depending on how it's structured, but that's very technical. And I go into all of that in my courses and the coaching and everything. But just to keep it simple, they want 100, it's worth 100. We get an agreement with them for, let's say, 100. Forget the 90, let's say 100. We get an agreement with them for $100,000. They're happy. They're ecstatic, right? They get 100,000. So we tell them, okay, cool. We're going to pay you $1,000 a month over the next 36 months and cash you out at the end of 36 months. So we get that lease with an option to purchase agreement with them, or the lease purchase memorandum. We file that memorandum with the clerk of court. So it puts us on file as having equitable interest in the property, which is, again, something else that's a little bit technical. So from there, we go and we find a buyer, not a cash buyer like we do with the wholesale deal with the assignments. We find a buyer that is actually wanting to live in the property. And so we have the lease with the option to purchase agreement with the seller. That's A and B. Now, B and C is going to be a completely separate lease with the option to purchase with the buyer. So from A to B, we're the tenant buyer. And from B to C, we're the seller. And our buyer is the tenant buyer. So let's go back to the numbers. We get the property at $100,000, $1,000 a month for 36 months. How we make our money is we're going to sell to the tenant buyer at $120,000 at $1,200 a month for 24 months. And the reason why we do a lower term with the buyer than we do with the seller, typically we do 24 with the buyer and we do 48 with the seller. That way we have enough time. The higher the seller want to go on terms, like the better, because the longer we can make money, then the better. And there's a lot of other little tips and tricks as to how to make different amounts of money off of these deals, like principal only if they own the majority of equity in the property, and just a whole host of other things. But A to B, 100,000 a month, 48 months, let's say. B to C, 120,000, 1,200 a month, and 24 months. So where do we make our money? Firstly, we're going to tell C that they need what's called a non-refundable deposit. And this is why this is better than wholesaling, because with a wholesale deal, you're going to make $5,000, $10,000. With this, you're going to make that same amount, if not more, and then you're going to make money over time, and then you're going to cash out at the end. So you're going to say, all right, $10,000 down. So you're going to make that $10,000 up front. And then over the course of 24 months, you're going to make that other $200, which is the difference between the $1,200 that you get from them and $1,000 that you give to the seller. So 2 times 24, that's $4,800. So now you've made $14,800. So now that's the first 2 paydays, payday 1, payday 2. Now there's a third time you get paid in this deal, and that's when the buyer cashes you out at that 110, because the money that they're paying you every month usually does not go towards their actual purchase price. So at the end of their 24 months, they still owe you $110,000. Now, if you structured this correctly, you with the seller, you've been paying down that $100,000 that you owe them. Let's say over the course of 2 years, you paid it down to $80,000, right? So now you only owe the seller $80,000, and the buyer still owes you $110,000. So now when the buyer cashes you out at $110,000, you pocket that other $30,000 from $80,000, what you owe the seller, and $110,000, what you just got paid from the buyer. So now it was $14,800 plus that other $30,000. You just made $44,800 without ever putting a penny into a property, without ever putting a down payment. And let's say, well, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, what if the seller wants a down payment? So what we do is we do the lease option memorandum with them, which gives us 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, however long you agree upon to find a seller, because our agreement with the seller is going to be to find a buyer. Our agreement with the seller is going to be contingent upon us finding a buyer. So once we find a buyer, let's say the seller wants $10,000 down, and we find a buyer, okay, we're going to tell the buyer we need $15,000, $20,000, something like that. And so we only give the seller money out of what we get from the buyer. We never use our own money for anything. And 60 days pass and we haven't found a buyer. That means that we're not going to find a buyer for this deal. So you can either extend that agreement with the seller and try to find a buyer again, or you can let the deal go because it wasn't a deal in the first place, right? Or you can renegotiate them the prices. So maybe the 100,000 was too much. You knock it down to 80, and then you change the price. Now, the good thing about this is whatever your back end price is with you and the buyer, they're going to be willing to pay that premium because they can get in the house now versus having to deal with a bank now. So that's a premium price, because even though the property is only worth $100,000, they're willing to agree to $120,000, $130,000, $140,000, $150,000 that they don't have to pay for a couple years because they get in their house now. Plain and simple. It's the most amazing thing that I've discovered in my adulthood. I can tell you that much. And now let's move over to subject 2. But before we get into that, if you guys are finding any value in what I'm telling you in this video right now, make sure you remember to hit that subscribe button, turn on that bell, and share this video with whoever you think may benefit from it. So, subject 2. These only work when someone has a mortgage. Okay? And the whole thing with subject 2 is you're buying the property subject to the existing mortgage. So that means that it doesn't mean that you're assuming the mortgage, which an assumption of a mortgage means that the mortgage now is in your name. You're not assuming the mortgage. You're buying the property with the original mortgage staying in place. And a lot of people are probably thinking like, a lot of you guys are probably thinking like, how can you do that? Well, what some people don't know is there's 2 parts of buying a house when you dealing with a mortgage. There's the house itself, and then there's the mortgage. You can own both of those, or you can only own one. If you go to a bank and get a loan to buy a house, you own the house and you own the mortgage. Now, if you subject to that house to someone, that new person now owns the house, but you still own the mortgage. And what that means is the mortgage remains in your name while the person that just bought the house from you continues to pay it off. Now, people that are interested in deals like this, sellers, they're over leveraged. They don't have the money to pay the mortgage. They're underwater. They have problems. They bought a house that they thought that they were going to fix up, but they don't have the money or the skill or whatever to fix it up. And I've literally had someone give me two houses, a duplex or two flat, what we call them in Chicago, and 2-bath house with an attached garage. Because the first person bought the house, bought the 2-flat when he thought he was going to have time and the money to fix it up. He was paying a mortgage and he was just hemorrhaging money. And so he's just like, I just need you to take this from me. So got that duplex. I'll go into the details on that in another video. And another house, a guy came up here. He let someone talk him into buying a house. I don't know how you do that. Came up here from Cali, had someone talk him into buying a house, and then he felt like he was stuck in Iowa and couldn't go home, and he was all depressed, talking about he wanted to kill himself and all this other type of stuff. And he gave me the house, called me a superhero, something like that. But these people are out there. And then once you take control of that property via subject to, you now own that house. You can do whatever you want to do with it. You can either throw it on the market and sell it, or you can rent it out forever. And one of the things that you want to tell, and I go over this more in my in other videos and in my coaching and courses, one of the things that you tell people when you're looking for a subject to, number one, you're looking for that pain that they don't want to pay that mortgage. You tell them, I'll take over the mortgage for you. And a lot of sellers ask, well, how long before you pay it off? And one of your rebuttals can be, as long as I pay it every month, does it really matter? And a lot of people ask, well, will this hinder me from being able to buy a house? No, it doesn't. It does not hinder you from being able to buy another house. If anything, it helps you because I'm paying your mortgage every single month, which is boosting your credit. And it's showing that you make on-time payments each and every month. So it's a whole lot more to these things, guys. And again, all of these processes are very, very simple, but they're not easy, especially wholesaling. Wholesaling, assignments, cash outs, cash deals, they're not that easy because you're offering people a little bit of money. Subject to and lease purchases, lease sandwiches or sign outs or whatever, they're easier because how much do you want for your house? 200,000? So I'll take it, but you got to agree to these terms. You're literally giving people what they ask for. So they're way easier. So anyway, that's the end of this particular video. I'm going to make more videos going more in depth with each of these strategies. So make sure you're keeping track. And if you guys have any questions, you can message me in the comments or find my email address somewhere on here. And I'll see you guys in the next video.